Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Well, a judge has clipped the wings of the SEC on cybersecurity. Who's really to blame for the blue screen of death? And are EV charges really starting to get better? We've got all that and more on Techstrong Gang. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. As I mentioned in the opening, we've got some great, meaty, juicy stories to go over today. Unfortunately, there's just so much going on in the world. There's no lack of good news topics to cover. But we're happy to have our gang here with us today. We've got 4 people in our gang segment for today. Let me introduce them to you. First of all, fresh off his vacation in the Caribbean, it's our friend from Tech Field Day, Stephen Foskett in the Futurum Group. Hey, Stephen, welcome back. I hope you're back in the swing of things.
No, man, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to be slow and calm today. You don't expect me to be speaking up about anything.
I know you better. But okay, welcome back, Mon. Next up, to my immediate left, she is our editor for all things green and sustainable and Echo Insights, as well as analyst on these topics. It's our own Bonnie Schneider. Hi, Bonnie. How are you?
Doing great.
Great. And then to my far left, well, he wasn't on vacation. He's held down the fort while we were away. Here live in Boca Raton, our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard.
Still here, changing the desk, man.
Yeah.
Changing the desk. Okay, welcome, Mike. So, guys, look, the theme of, as a law school graduate, former attorney, the thing we're seeing is that the judicial wing of government has really been clamping down on the authority of administrative agencies to.
Let me walk everybody through this case for a second so they can level set. 2 seconds. So what seems to have happened is a judge ruled in an appeal that the SEC doesn't necessarily or can't bring charges against SolarWinds and the CISO of SolarWinds on 2 particular issues. One is the judge said there's no evidence of an actual scheme to defraud investors, so therefore the SEC can't bring at least 2/3 of the charges. And then my favorite part of the judge's ruling, if you read it, is that he said that no one would infer that articles and blogs and other items of quote unquote puffery are part of a scheme to entice people to invest in a company. So therefore that's not legitimate evidence. And this is also going along on the backdrop of a separate case where we have this whole Chevron ruling thing we've been talking about in a couple episodes ago, where it is probable that the SEC may not even have the authority to pursue a lot of these cases because the Supreme Court is saying that unless it is specifically outlined by Congress, you can't default to the agency. You default to whether or not the court has the power to decide whether or not this ruling or this crime was committed. I'm going to start with you, Alan.
So I'll go back to my original point, Mike. I'm glad you laid that table, but the judicial branch of our government is claiming for themselves the absolute right, saying if it's not specifically enumerated in the act that created the particular agency, they have no right to do anything. And in today's complicated world, this is a recipe for chaos and disaster, right? Our world works way too quick to sit around waiting for Congress to get their act together and specifically enumerate a particular power or non-power. These agencies need the ability to govern, to run things, to operate, right? They've taken, this, if it's not specifically said in there, they can't do it approach, but these agencies need to run and regulate a very dynamic workplace, a very dynamic infrastructure, a very dynamic world. Congress doesn't move at the speed of the internet.
I don't disagree, but there's this thing called due process that seems to be getting in the way, and people.
It's not. There's always been due process. This is judicial overactivism, and what's really funny to me is the party that are putting most of these judges in place were the people who wanted cut down on judicial activism.
Well, I guess they had a choice between federal overreach and judicial activism, so they waited and came up with this, I think.
I don't know. I don't think it bodes well. I mean, look, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that. I don't want to get this, hey, this thing should not get political, but I think I should point out as well that J.D. Vance, who is now the nominee for vice president on the Republican side, is a very outspoken critic of Wall Street as well. I think that perhaps the direction that all of this is going, because if you've got Harris on the one hand and Vance on the other hand, that's not going to bode well for a lot of these Wall Street types. So I wonder if we could end up with a situation where basically no matter which party wins in November, some of this stuff could change. But I'd also like to point out that I feel like this story is maybe a little overblown because this is just a small portion of the repercussions from SolarWinds. And the impact of that, sure, maybe the SEC can't enforce these little areas over here, but the overall impact was tremendous. There was a huge amount of pushback on the company. And, I think that this is just a small setback for people who are trying to see some kind of consequences come to SolarWinds for this outage. Also, I do think it's ironic that this would come right after the CrowdStrike impact, which has a little, it rhymes with what happened with SolarWinds.
So sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, right? But to be fair, though, look, I don't think the SEC is competent enough to get too far down into the weeds on cybersecurity. But I think what the SEC can say is that it's their job to make sure that the public and the people who buy and trade equities have faith that these companies who are listed, public companies, are doing the reasonable thing when it comes to their cybersecurity.
So,
I was
just going to say, can they encourage more transparency doing that without implementing, find a happy medium between implementing strict guidelines?
Well, I think the question is, how far down in the weeds do you want to get? What's reasonable? I think that, hey, I'm not into CISOs getting charged criminally for incidents like this, absent gross negligence or some criminal intent. But, I do think there should be a reasonable standard that public companies have to follow. I do agree with the judge that, it wasn't just that you read the quote on the blogs and so forth, but the real legal issue here was, did SolarWinds make a full disclosure or a reasonably full disclosure of the severity of the breach, or did they kind of puff it over and say it was no big deal so as not to set off panic among their investors? And again, what the judge is saying is, don't believe blogs, they're full of crap.
You can write anything you want now in a blog or a press release, apparently.
Right. Mm-hmm. But there should be a reasonable test that the company disclosed in a reasonable manner what the risk here is so that investors and shareholders can make an informed decision. That is the SEC's charter, right? To make sure that investors and the public have the facts they need to make reasonable investments, right? And it's not just insiders and stuff like this.
Probable assessment that any of this is going to get fixed anytime soon in Congress?
No. No way. In an election year?
No
way.
Every year is an election year now. I mean, that's the thing. And the thing actually that worries me, to Alan's point here, is that increasingly companies are treating, well, for one thing, they don't have as much professional PR as they once did. And for another thing, I think companies really are treating social media posts and blogs and so on as official communications, because that's the nature of media today. To defend y'all against the puffery and frivolousness of blogs. If you're going to say that blogs are frivolous puffery, then basically then there's no communication coming out of companies like Tesla or X, which only communicate using social media. They don't have official, media and investor relations organs that are functional. And increasingly other companies are like that too. I really feel like they got that point wrong. I feel like companies really do need to be held responsible to the official statements they're making in their official blogs. I think that there is certainly a sort of puffery that we don't need to be constantly policing what people are saying everywhere. I mean, for one, I'm really tired of companies putting up the giant SEC disclaimer slide at the beginning of every freaking presentation, as if that somehow protects them or us or anyone against what's going on here. But that being said, we do have to recognize that an official company blog post is just as much an official statement from the company as a press release or an announcement from that same person in public or on Bloomberg TV or whatever. These are official statements, and I think that companies need to be held accountable to them.
I would just like to say that Techstrong editorial remains committed to its role as puffery police. We will prevent this.
Yeah. Depends who you're talking to, I guess. But look, the answer to this is, first of all, I think we're going to have to see when Congress drafts laws now empowering agencies, they're going to need to put some sort of catch-all in there that the agency can do what it deems reasonably necessary to further the aims that why the agency was empowered.
I think to your earlier point, lawmakers are going to guard their privileges jealously, and they will put some rules in place that say, we're not ceding all this to the courts.
It just, part of it also, politically is nature abhors a vacuum. And I think the courts are seeing a vacuum in the ability of both our legislative and executive arms of government to function properly. And so they're stepping in, but it's not necessarily a great thing either. Anyway, there'll be more on this, I guess, over the years, or over the weeks and months ahead. Let's take a break here, though, because, now we've got this. So let's talk a little CrowdStrike, Microsoft, and who's the real bad guy? The EU? We'll be back on Techstrong, gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, folks, we're back and the saga continues. Microsoft is saying that the reason that CrowdStrike was able to put an update out that worked at the kernel level is because the EU a few years back created a requirement that said all these security companies have to be able to do that in order to foster ongoing competition. I don't know. I think that this is not necessarily the root cause of this particular issue, shall we say, but what's your take on what's going on here?
First of all, what the EU did a couple of years ago was they blocked Microsoft from blocking security companies with making any kernel changes to Windows for security reasons, right? Prior to that ruling, if you were a security company and you saw a vulnerability or you wanted to head off potential security issues in Windows, you did not have authority, even though you might have super admin privileges, you did not have authority to make kernel level changes to the Windows operating system. Only Microsoft could do that. And of course, when Microsoft Security wanted to do it, they did it. So this gave an unfair advantage to Microsoft and Microsoft Security to the detriment of the whole security industry. So the EU said, no, it's a level playing field. Anyone could make kernel changes to Windows, given if they have the, that admin rights. That's very different, though, than saying all security companies have automatic rights to update Windows. that a particular user of Windows decides what their update policy is. And I think that's the real reason why this went bad here, right? Most people today, very much like on our phones, we give blanket privilege, to update as necessary when updates are available. And they don't do the checks and the lab tests before they install an update, especially something as critical as security. And so that's really the issue here. So Microsoft blaming EU, yes, had the EU not done that, even if a user said, go ahead, CrowdStrike, update it, they had been prevented from updating the kernel. But that's not the updates we're looking for here, right? The updates we're looking for here is people's ability to just, turn updates on like most of us have on our phone. We update at will, and we don't test these things before we roll them out.
Stephen, failing the test, is that the issue?
Yeah, I don't know. I think somebody failed the test, and it was CrowdStrike. To the point here on Microsoft's side, I see what they're saying, and this is a clever spin to put on it. Frankly, I'm surprised that people are calling this, the Windows bug or the Windows crash or something, because, I really feel like, the root cause of this is in CrowdStrike's hands. It seems like they're the ones who made the mistake. Yes, the EU did say that Microsoft couldn't block security companies from making kernel modules. And yes, that theoretically in an alternate universe where everything went differently might have prevented this. But remember, too, that this was pretty much outdated versions of Windows anyway. Would those have really been protected from this if the EU had not pushed against Microsoft and Defender? And to Alan's point as well, Microsoft was really acting in a way as both the maker of the operating system as well as the security software here. And boy, would Microsoft have had egg on their face, not if, but when Windows Defender caused an issue just like this. Because, of course, things happen, things could happen. I think that this whole discussion of, it was Microsoft's fault, it was the EU's fault, is all misdirection. This is really the nature of things. And I really like the fact that you guys are getting right down to the question of security and testing. Should customers of CrowdStrike have tested each of these updates to make sure that they don't blue screen every version of Windows, every system that they've got out there? Well, maybe, but these were services. These were sold as a service, not as software. And as a service, again, the fault and the responsibility lies on CrowdStrike to make sure that their service performs as advertised. At least that's my take on it. So yep. I feel like a lot of this is really misdirection. I don't think this was Microsoft's fault. I don't think this was the EU's fault. And I don't think any of those people would have fixed this problem.
So, but this gets to the heart of cloud, of the whole cloud and SaaS ecosystem. Yes, I could hire a service. I could outsource testing patches. I could outsource doing the patches. I could outsource my security. I could outsource my infrastructure. But I still bear responsibility. It's still my name on it. It's still my customers who are being impacted. So if you were stuck in Antigua with a blue screen of death showing when your flight is loading, and you said, you start grumbling about Delta, United, American, whoever, take your pick. And they said, well, Mr. Foskett, I'm sorry you're stuck in Antigua for a day, but don't blame us. We hired CrowdStrike as our service provider to do this, and they were supposed to do it as part of their service. You don't give a rat's what about what CrowdStrike was supposed to do. You pay Delta.
That's
and Delta,
true.
You bear responsibility. I don't want to hear Azure's out. I don't want to hear AWS is out. I'm your customer.
I think it's important to call out Southwest at this point because they were not affected
Thank
by
God
this.
for Windows 3.1.
Yes, because they were running such an old version of Windows that, and this is the airline that had their own outage last year.
Well, they'll have their own outages as a result of that. But, JetBlue, I flew JetBlue this weekend. They were not affected. I don't think they run Windows. I think they might be a Linux shop. But in any event, look, it could happen. I remember 2005, 2006, Mitch Ashley and I are in New York City meeting with one of the 3 global CIOs of Citibank. It wasn't Citi at the time. Guy named, he's retired now, Peter Fisher. And we asked Peter how soon, like at that time, Patch Tuesday was all the rage, right? Microsoft rolls out. How soon do you install your Patch Tuesday patches? He said, 90 to 120 days after they come out. So a full quarter after they came out. Well, Peter, how do you do that? Why do you, that? He said, well, we've made the determination that we have, hundreds of thousands of nodes, that the risk to taking them down or losing our business far exceeds the risk of any one security patch. And that they consciously made the decision to do that. Now, that's one extreme. Patch at will is the other extreme. Do we need some reasonable, I'm big on reasonable today. Do we need some reasonable middle ground between those two where, you've got to, try some testing, because even CrowdStrike can have all the different configurations that this thing's going to run in.
How long is it nowadays between when I announce I have a patch that the bad guys reverse engineer the patch to drive the exploit, and is the window narrowing the point where more people are tending to patch sooner than later?
And that's exactly the point here. That's exactly what CrowdStrike was trying to do. The reason they pushed out this signature update is because they needed to, in order to block some exploits that were out there in the wild. And I don't really blame them for that. I think really the core here, I gotcha. By the way, Alan, I think you vastly overestimate the level of IT expertise in Antigua. There were no blue screens on the island, at least none that I saw. But that being said, there were tons of them in Washington Dulles. They affected all sorts of things. And that to me was the core here. United is mainframe driven, but they still had outages because the kiosks and the signage isn't mainframe driven. Saying, to have Linux people or Mac people be like, hey, we weren't affected. That's ridiculous.
Today they weren't.
Connected world, people who don't use Windows, don't touch Windows at all, were affected by this because that's the nature of this thing. I think we have to address concentration of risk. And I think that you're right that maybe we do need to start taking a step back and saying, I did select a service provider to manage this for me, but maybe I need to kind of manage my service provider and test things instead of just continually rolling things out constantly.
I do have a machine at home that was affected, and the problem is I just can't find enough time to reboot this thing 15 times in order to bring it back up.
That is the workaround.
That's what it takes.
The workaround is manual, and it's not easy for sure. Anyway, again, I don't think it's the EU. Nice try, Microsoft. CrowdStrike, I need you to do better on testing before you roll out patches. We're going to take another break here on Techstrong Gang, and we're going to be back with some good news in the EV world. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. Recently, I had the chance to speak with the Chief Marketing Officer of Blink Charging because electric vehicles, as we know, in demand, and not just in the U.S., but globally. In fact, Jennifer shared with me some expansion they have planned going from Latin America to the U.S. And also, how do we alleviate what's known as range anxiety? Take a look.
And this is really recent that Blink Charging is going to be involved with a company that's funded by Warren Buffett. Can you explain what's happening?
Yeah, really exciting to be selected by the official BYD dealership group of fame. It's one of the largest dealership groups in Mexico to provide EV charging solutions. We currently have level 2 chargers installed there. As part of this agreement, we'll be providing DCFC, which is fast charging, to a couple of their locations. This is going to be the first ever publicly available DCFCs with GBT ports in that region.
That is so exciting. And I know that when it comes to electric cars, everybody, I think, knows somebody that has one. And then we also know some people that are apprehensive about moving forward with it. One of the concerns is always the range, that you're going to drive 3 hours, 5 hours, and run out of battery power. And then you're going to be in an area where there's no chargers. Can you talk about what's happening to alleviate those fears?
Absolutely. Alleviating that range anxiety, converting it to range confidence. That's what we're here to do. That's a part of our mission. We wake up every day to support the EV drivers and let them know that we've got their backs, one parking space at a time, one charger at a time. We're here in the market really to provide those solutions to make sure that drivers can get from point A to point B. And we believe that L2 charging, so not DCFC, DCFC has its place, but L2 charging is the key to achieving that true range confidence.
So expansion for electric vehicle use faces a couple of obstacles. One is getting people to come on board, though it looks like, according to the latest estimations, we're looking at the usage increase by 6-fold in the next 2 decades. So eventually it is coming. But the other is connecting the architecture between charging station to charging station and making sure no matter what type of electric vehicle that you have, you can charge it along the way. And I know, Stephen, you have some thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And electric vehicles are something that I cover professionally, but also personally. I mean, my family is 100% EV. We have 2 EVs. I drive one regularly. We're on our third. We have a Tesla, and we have a BMW i3, which is like a normal, like a city EV. That's my daily driver. We've had a lot of experience with this and with these charging networks. First of all, I do have to applaud efforts like what Blink are doing to expand the network, especially the DC fast charge network. Blink is a smaller player in the DC fast charge space, but hopefully these expansions that they're talking about are going to have more availability. That's really the problem. There's sort of different perspectives on charging when it comes to EVs. And again, as an EV owner and user, I can say that there's kind of, in my mind, there's like 3 phases of charging there, and it kind of corresponds to the 3 levels. So, level 1 is basically plug it into a regular outlet at home. My little EV that I drive every day has never been charged by anything other than level 1 charging in a regular outlet at my house. And that's been sufficient for literally 6 years of driving across 2 different cars. But that's because I plug it in every night. It's fully charged whenever I get into it. It only gets like 90 to 120 miles of range, and I don't care because I drive 15 miles a day, so everything's fine, right? So that's kind of the level 1 thing. The level 2 is the sort of higher power AC chargers that we have, for example, for the Tesla. It's a 240 volt outlet, like a washer dryer outlet. We plug it in a couple times a week. It's able to charge fully overnight, and that's how it is because it's at home. There's also that kind of chargers at destinations. So, for example, the movie theater, our downtown shopping area. We've been to many hotels. In fact, that's one of the primary considerations that we look for when on a road trip with the Tesla is, does it have a destination charger? Because even though it doesn't charge fast, it'll charge the car fully overnight and we can get back on the road. And that's absolutely brilliant. And then there's the DC, the level 3 charging. And that's basically what you need to do when you're on a road trip. And that is the big hole in the American charging infrastructure. If you're not driving a Tesla, then you ought to have road trip anxiety. I would never take the BMW on a road trip. Last time I did, I arrived at a level 3 DC charger to find that it was on the fritz, and I had to stay overnight unplanned because the only thing I could get was a level 2 charge, and it took like 8 hours to charge the dang thing. I would never take the thing on a road trip. But the Tesla, their supercharging network is freaking brilliant. So it works perfectly. Never have to worry about it. We took that car 1,000-mile road trip, no problem, anywhere in America. There's always charging. It's always quick. It's always easy. That's where these other brands need to get. And that's what I'm hearing from companies like Blink, like Electrify America. The automakers are getting together to put their own together. That's really what we need. We need better DC fast charging infrastructure. And then the other thing that she mentioned in there that I heard kind of zip right past is that in North America, we're actually standardizing on the Tesla physical connector as well as the logical interface for payments. That is going to streamline things and smooth things out so much, because if you can just plug in and go and you don't have to worry, is it going to fit my car? Is it the right connector? Everything works a lot better. And also that opens the Tesla chargers to non-Tesla EVs, which again is going to be a thing of beauty because their network is so good. As of now, according to the data that I'm seeing, Tesla has more DC fast charging ports than all others in America combined. And that is the thing that needs to be addressed.
That's a great point, because if we have that universal architecture, that will hopefully get more people to adapt to it.
Well, so I don't have a Tesla, but I do have a BMW. And Stephen's i3 is, a small, as he called it, urban commuter. I have a large SUV. And I get great mileage. I mean, my BMW fully charged claims to have a range of 380 or 390 miles, not real life. But, and you're right, if you're just going 15, 20 miles, 40 miles a day, it's no big deal. I do have a fast charger at my house, and I charge it in at night like I do a phone. And
that's a level 2 charger.
Yeah, level 2. And so I very rarely have. Taking it on the road, I had the same experience Stephen did. There are plenty of advertised, DC chargers, which in my case would go 10 to 80%. It'd take my car from 10% to 80% in 20 minutes. Doable. Two major problems. Number one, a lot of them are broke and they default back to like level 1 charging. And then number two, the ones that do work, there are lines. And it's like the Wild West, people cutting lines, this one left, hold my spot for me. We need tremendous investment in infrastructure. I'd like to see every gas station in America offer a electric charging option.
How many households in America can afford multiple EVs to align to their driving habits based on what?
Well, but EVs are becoming, there's not much of a premium these days for EVs versus gas vehicles.
But most people are going to have
I'll point out, no, Alan's right. The average price of an EV in the United States in 2024 is less than the average price of a gas-powered car in the United States in 2024. There's not a premium.
Yeah,
and most EVs are not the little shoebox that I have. Most EVs have 200 plus miles of range for the same or less price than a gas car.
Most people are not going to have two EVs, one for local travel and one for...
No, but so do most people have two gasoline-powered cars?
Only to maybe the husband and the wife to go to work, but, they take one of those as usually an SUV and one is smaller.
And it's the same thing with EVs. That's what Stephen has. That's,
I think that's what Stephen was saying. I agree. I think that there is a general misconception that there aren't as many that it's obviously there are plenty that are very expensive, but if they make more and different styles to accommodate different people's needs at lower price points, that would definitely help the situation.
And not everybody's a family, right?
Right.
Most people actually aren't families. They are individuals driving around that they're not going to spring for two cars.
Yeah, one of the bigger challenges too is that not everybody lives in a house and can have an EV charger at home. I think that's the biggest challenge, because then you have to start thinking about destination chargers at work. You have to think about how long that's going to take. Again, I mean, you plug a Tesla into a level 2 charger, you're looking at an 8-hour charge, not a 30.
Well, that's from 0 to 100. Though.
So if
I pull into 100.
So if I pull into a destination like a hotel, what can I expect to have in terms of number of chargers available versus number of guests who want to use that?
I do that all the time. Many hotels now have 2 to 4 chargers if they have it available. And most of them are actually free, which is absolutely miraculous. Honestly, the biggest problem I have with hotel destination chargers is somebody parked their non-EV in that spot because it's a good spot in the lot.
Yeah. Look, I don't think the problem's with the vehicles. I don't think it's with the vehicle costs. I don't think it's with the vehicle technology. As Stephen said, they have adapters now because there were only two standards. It was Betamax and VHS, right? It was Tesla and non-Tesla.
Well, there was three standards, but yeah.
Okay. And, the real issue is our infrastructure for EV charging. And there's no simple way around it. You got to invest a lot of money. You're not going to invest a lot of money unless there's a payback.
Well, in the Blink charging case, that one of the big investors that they're working with right now is they announced as Warren Buffett, who's is invested in their Mexico facilities. So the investment is coming and the infrastructure hopefully as well.
We'll see, and then we'll uncover the next bottleneck, which is we don't generate enough electricity to power all of these EV infrastructure charging points.
Yeah, that'll get taken care of. Yep. Solar power, baby.
Okay. Solar powered level 3 charges coming to a house near you. Hey, it's about that time.
Is it?
Stephen, welcome back and thanks for joining us on the gang today.
Thank you for having a topic that I feel passionate about here with the EV charging. I'm sorry to go at it, but man, you woke me up from my my vacation slumber.
Take it easy, man. All right, Mike, excuse me, Bonnie. Another B. Thank you for joining us today on the gang. We'll be back tomorrow with some more gang members, some great news stories. There's no lack of stuff going on out there for us to talk about, but we still have a full day of Techstrong TV ahead of you. Check it out. And we'll see you tomorrow. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.